40 miles northwest of Greensburg, Kansas, the morning sun beat down on Fisher Lake like it had something to prove. June 12, 2024. Dennis Cole had been operating heavy equipment for Kansas Department of Transportation for 23 years, and he'd seen his share of strange things at the bottom of reservoirs, tires, shopping carts. Once, an entire pontoon boat that nobody reported missing. But never this. The lake had been draining for 3 days. Environmental assessment, they called it. Structural survey of the dam, the kind of bureaucratic procedure that happened every couple decades, whether it needed to or not. Fisher Lake wasn't big, maybe 200 acres at full capacity, fed by Buckner Creek and sitting in a natural depression that had been here long before the dam was built in 1956. Dennis had watched the waterline drop foot by foot. First, the dead trees that had been submerged for decades emerged like skeletal fingers. Then the old fence posts from the ranch that used to be here. Then rocks, mudflats, and the smell of decay that always came with exposing a lake bed to open air. At 11:20 a.m., through the cab window of his excavator, Dennis saw something that made him stop mid-scoop. Something white, angular. Metal catching the light in a way rocks didn't. He set down his load and climbed out, boots sinking into mud that smelled like dead fish and time itself. The shape was 40 feet from what used to be the shoreline in 2007. It sat in what would have been, Dennis estimated, about 35 feet of water back then, deeper if you counted spring flooding. He walked closer. A full-size van, white, caked in 17 years of sediment, algae growing on every surface like a second skin, but underneath all that, unmistakably, a vehicle. Dennis pulled his radio from his belt. His hand was shaking slightly, though he couldn't have said why yet. "Boss, you need to see this." "What you got, Dennis?" "There's a vehicle in the lakebed, full-size van, looks old, real old." Silence on the other end. Then, "Stay where you are, don't touch anything, I'm coming down." By noon, 6 vehicles were parked on the access road that ran along the dam. KDOT supervisor, environmental inspector, and Sheriff Bradley from Kiowa County, the same Thomas Bradley who'd been sheriff in 2007, who'd spent months searching for 12 people who vanished into thin air. Now everyone stood in a semicircle around the van, staring. Bradley was 71 now, retirement eligible for 6 years, but he'd stayed on. Some said it was because of the 12, the case that never closed, the prayer group that walked into a tornado and never came out. He approached the van slowly, each step careful in the sucking mud. His deputy, Martinez, who'd been fresh out of the academy in 2007, followed 3 paces behind. The van was a 2005 Ford E350, 15-passenger model, white paint visible beneath the algae, with faded lettering on the side that read, First Baptist Church, Greensburg, Kansas. Every person present knew what that meant. You couldn't live in Kiowa County and not know. "Hey, before we go further, where are you watching from?" Different parts of the world remember different natural disasters, and I'm curious which ones are part of your story. Drop a comment and let me know your location and any close calls you've had with severe weather. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. This story is going places you won't expect. Bradley pulled a rag from his back pocket and wiped the driver's side window. Algae smeared away, revealing glass that had somehow stayed intact underwater for 17 years. He cupped his hands and peered inside. Empty driver's seat, empty passenger seat. The steering wheel covered in sediment. A Greensburg High School parking pass still hanging from the rearview mirror, dated 2006-2007. He moved to the side door. Empty middle row, the back. He wiped the rear windows. Also empty. "No bodies," he called out. Martinez visibly exhaled. Bradley walked to the rear of the van. His boots left prints in the mud that immediately filled with water. He reached for the door handles. They didn't budge. He looked closer. A heavy chain, the kind you'd use to secure a gate or trailer, was wrapped around both handles. Pulled tight. Secured with a padlock the size of his fist. The chain was rusted but intact. The lock was still holding. "Why would you lock a van from the outside?" the KDOT supervisor asked. He was standing 20 feet back, like proximity to the van might contaminate him with whatever bad thing had happened here. Bradley straightened. His knees popped, his back ached, but his mind was sharper now than it had been in years. "You wouldn't," he said. "Someone else would." The environmental inspector, A woman named Chen, who'd driven in from Wichita, stepped forward. "Sheriff, I need to document this before anyone touches it further. This is now a potential crime scene, which means my agency needs to coordinate with—" "I know the protocol," Bradley said, not unkindly. "But we all know what this is." Martinez spoke up. "The 12 from the prayer group?" "The van they left in," Bradley said. "All 12 of them drove from the church to the shelter in this van. Pastor Jim Holbrook was driving. This is our van." "But no bodies," Martinez said. "Not yet," Bradley said. He looked at the lake bed stretching out around them. Mud and muck for acres. If the bodies had been thrown from the van, they could be anywhere. 17 years of sediment could bury a lot. But something about the locked chain bothered him. If the tornado had picked up the van and thrown it into the lake, the official theory for 17 years, why would the doors be chained shut? Tornadoes didn't chain doors. People did. To understand what that chain meant, you have to go back to 2007, back to Greensburg before it was a crater, back to when First Baptist Church sat on the corner of Main and Kansas Street, a modest building with good people inside who believed prayer could move mountains, back to the 12 people who thought they were safe. Greensburg, Kansas in 2007 was home to 1,544 people, small enough that everyone knew everyone, big enough to have its own high school, hospital, and 3 churches that competed politely for souls every Sunday. First Baptist was the largest, with a congregation of about 200. The building was red brick, built in 1963 after a fire took the original wooden structure. It had a tall white steeple, a basement that flooded every spring, and a fellowship hall where the ladies' auxiliary hosted potlucks that could feed an army. Pastor Jim Holbrook had been leading the congregation for 6 years. He was 41 in 2007, married to Margaret. 2 kids, David, 16, and Sarah, 13. He drove a modest sedan, wore modest suits, and gave sermons that people actually wanted to hear. He had a gift for making scripture feel relevant, making 2,000-year-old parables connect to wheat prices and high school football, and the question of whether the new Walmart going in on Highway 54 was good for the community or not. People trusted him. The Wednesday night prayer group had been his idea. Started in 2005, it met every Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the church basement. Usually 20 to 30 people attended, mostly older congregation members, retirees, people with time on Wednesday evenings and a desire to pray for the community, for the nation, for missionaries in far-off places whose names they struggled to pronounce, but whose souls they genuinely cared about. On May 2, 2007, 12 people attended the prayer meeting. Let's name them again, because names matter, because they were real people with real lives, and what happened to them wasn't random. It was chosen, calculated, executed with a precision that took 17 years to uncover. Pastor Jim Holbrook, 41, leader, father of 2, husband, embezzler, murderer, gone. Margaret Holbrook, 39, pastor's wife, elementary school teacher, unaware that her husband had a second family 3 hours away in Oklahoma City, dead. David Holbrook, 16, honor student, baseball team captain, planning to attend Kansas State on a partial scholarship, dead. Sarah Holbrook, 13, 8th grade, clarinet player, wanted to be a veterinarian, dead. Robert Chen, 68, retired farmer, treasurer of the church board, starting to notice discrepancies in the books, dead. Linda Chen, 66, Robert's wife of 43 years, quilter, grandmother of 5, dead. Marcus Webb, 34, former Navy, strong swimmer, only survivor, for 48 hours, dead. Julie Webb, 32, Marcus's wife, nurse at Kiowa County Memorial Hospital, pregnant with their second child, dead. Tyler Webb, 4, Julie and Marcus's son, loved dinosaurs, dead. Dorothy Keene, 71, widow, church organist for 30 years, made the best lemon bars in Kiowa County, dead. Samuel Marsh, 58, hardware store owner, deacon, never missed a Wednesday prayer meeting, dead. Catherine Marsh, 56, Samuel's wife, Sunday school teacher, known for her patience with difficult children, dead. 12 people, 3 families, 1 pastor, all dead by 6:01 p.m. on May 4, 2007. But the how and why, that took 17 years to piece together. The prayer meeting on May 2, 2007 was routine. They gathered at 7 p.m. Holbrook opened with a brief meditation on Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. They sang a hymn, Great is thy faithfulness. Dorothy played the piano, slightly off-key because the church couldn't afford to have it tuned more than once a year. They prayed for the missionaries in Thailand, for the Johnson family whose daughter was struggling with addiction, for rain. It had been a dry spring, for the safety of the community. At 8:15 p.m. they closed with the Lord's Prayer, said in unison, voices overlapping in the way that only happens when people have said the same words together for years. They gathered their Bibles, their coats, their purses. Robert Chen approached Pastor Holbrook as people filed out. Jim, can we talk Friday? I've been going through the books, and there are some transfers I'd like to clarify. Holbrook smiled. Easy. Natural. So of course, Robert. My office, 2 p.m.? Perfect. If Robert had lived another 72 hours, he would have discovered that Pastor Jim Holbrook had embezzled $847,000 from First Baptist Church over 5 years. Small withdrawals at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, coded as mission support or building maintenance or benevolence fund. But in 2006, the withdrawals got bigger, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 in December alone, listed as furnace replacement that never happened. The money went to Oklahoma City, to an apartment on North May Avenue, to a woman named Rachel and 2 children, Emma, 8, and Joshua, 5, who believed Jim was a traveling pharmaceutical salesman whose wife had died of cancer 5 years ago. Jim visited Rachel every other weekend, paid her rent, bought groceries, played father to Emma and Joshua, who called him Daddy, and had no idea their daddy was married to someone else. He was living 2 lives, both expensive. By May 2007, the church account was nearly empty. Robert Chen, as treasurer, was going to notice. The board would be notified, an audit would happen, police would be called. Jim Holbrook needed a solution. He found one in the sky. May 3rd, 2007, Thursday. The National Weather Service issued a tornado watch for south-central Kansas at 4 p.m. Not unusual. May in Kansas. You get watches and warnings the way other places get rain. By 6:01 p.m., the watch became a warning. By 7:01 p.m., meteorologists were using words like historic and unprecedented. A supercell had formed 60 miles west of Greensburg. It was moving east at 30 miles per hour. The rotation was clear on radar. The storm was producing hail the size of baseballs. At 9:18 p.m., the tornado touched down. At 9:45 p.m., it was rated EF5 on the enhanced Fujita scale. Winds estimated at over 200 miles per hour. The widest point, 1.7 miles across. It would stay on the ground for 22 miles. Greensburg was directly in its path. The sirens started at 9:30 p.m. By then, anyone watching the news knew this was bad. The National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency, the most severe warning possible. The text included words rarely seen. You could be killed if not underground or in a tornado shelter. Jim Holbrook was at home when the sirens started. Margaret was gathering the kids. Sarah was crying. David was trying to act brave but kept looking out the window at the sky, which had turned a color green that didn't exist in nature. We need to go, Margaret said. Now. The church has the basement shelter. You take the kids, Jim said. I need to make sure everyone at the church is okay, pastor responsibility. Jim, we don't have time. I'll be right behind you, go. Margaret, David, and Sarah left in Margaret's car. Headed for the church. Jim stayed behind for 15 minutes, made a phone call to his twin brother. Before we continue, I need to pause for something important. If you're finding this story gripping, hit that like button right now. And here's why I'm asking. YouTube's algorithm shows these videos to more people when engagement is high early. Every like in the first hour means potentially thousands more people will see this story. So if you think other people need to hear what happened in Greensburg, take 2 seconds and click that button. And comment anything, literally anything, so the algorithm knows this is worth sharing. Now let's talk about Jim's brother. James Holbrook had a twin brother named John. Identical twin, same face, same height, same build. But where Jim went to seminary and became a pastor, John went to prison, theft, assault, drug possession. John Holbrook had been in and out of county jails and state prisons since he was 19. By 2007, He was estranged from the family, homeless, drifting between Oklahoma City and Wichita, doing odd jobs for cash and sleeping in shelters. Jim hadn't spoken to John in 3 years, not since John showed up at the church drunk asking for money, and Jim had to call the police to remove him. But Jim kept track of John, because identical twins have a use, especially when you need someone to die in your place. On April 28, 2007, Jim drove to Wichita, found John at the Salvation Army shelter, offered him a deal. "I need help moving some furniture, church storage. I'll pay you $500 cash, just need you for a weekend." John, who never turned down cash, agreed. On May 3, 2007, at 9:35 p.m., John Holbrook was in the church van with Jim. They were parked behind the church, out of sight. "Why are we waiting?" John asked. "Tornado's coming." "I know," Jim said. He pulled a tire iron from under the driver's seat and struck John across the back of the head, hard enough to crack the skull, not hard enough to kill immediately. John slumped forward. Blood ran down his neck, pooling in the collar of his shirt. Jim dragged him to the back of the van, zip-tied his wrists, gagged him with duct tape, covered him with a tarp. Then Jim drove to the church, arriving at 9:42 p.m. The church parking lot was chaos. Families running for the basement, cars arriving every 30 seconds. The sky was rotating. The sound was like a freight train that never stopped. Jim parked the van near the entrance, ran inside. "Everyone in the basement!" he shouted. "Now! This is the real deal!" Margaret, David, and Sarah were already downstairs, along with about 40 other people. The basement was cramped, concrete walls, one small room with a reinforced ceiling, the designated shelter. Robert and Linda Chen were there. Samuel and Catherine Marsh, Dorothy Keene, Marcus and Julie Webb, with Tyler clinging to his mother's leg, terrified by the sirens and the noise and the way the building was shaking. Jim did a quick count. 43 people total. "Is everyone here?" someone shouted. "I think so," someone else shouted back. Jim's radio, church radios, the kind with limited range, crackled. "Pastor, it's hitting the south edge of town. You have maybe 2 minutes." Jim nodded, looked around the basement, found the faces he needed. "Robert, Samuel, Marcus, I need help. There are people at the nursing home who didn't evacuate. I'm taking the van. I need strong backs." Marcus hesitated. "Pastor, there's no time. Then we move fast. Julie, you and Tyler stay here. I'll have him back in 10 minutes. Julie's eyes widened. "Marcus, no." But Marcus was already moving. Military training. When someone says there are people in danger, you move. Samuel and Robert followed. They were older, but they were deacons, helpers. They didn't question the pastor. Jim turned to Dorothy. "Dorothy, I need you to coordinate here. You've been through tornadoes before. Keep everyone calm." Dorothy nodded, though her hands were shaking. "Margaret," Jim said, looking at his wife, "I love you. Stay with the kids." "Jim, please. I'll be right back." He kissed her, fast. Then he was gone, Marcus, Robert, and Samuel behind him. They climbed the stairs. The sound of the tornado was deafening now. The building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Outside, the sky was black-green. The rotation was visible. The funnel was a mile wide and maybe 3 miles away, moving toward them at 30 miles per hour. "Get in the van!" Jim shouted. "We have maybe 90 seconds!" They climbed in. Robert in the front passenger seat. Samuel and Marcus in the middle row. Jim started the engine and drove. But not toward the nursing home. He drove north, out of town, away from the shelter. "Pastor, wrong way," Robert shouted. "Shortcut," Jim shouted back. "Trust me." He drove for 2 miles, turned onto a dirt road, then another. He was heading toward Fisher Lake. "Pastor, where are we going?" Marcus demanded. He was leaning forward now, hand on the back of Jim's seat. "The nursing home is—" "There is no nursing home emergency," Jim said calmly. He pulled a pistol from under his seat, a Glock 19, pointed it at Robert. "Sit back, all of you." Robert froze. Samuel gasped. Marcus's hand moved toward the gun, military instinct kicking in. "Don't," Jim said. "I will shoot him. Then you. I need to do this cleanly, but I'll do it messy if you force me." "What are you doing?" Robert whispered. "Surviving," Jim said. He drove to the lake, parked 50 feet from the water's edge. The tornado was 3 miles away now, visible in the rearview mirror. The sound was like God tearing the world in half. "Out," Jim said. "All of you." They climbed out. Marcus considered running, but Jim had the gun and Robert and Samuel were old slow. If Marcus ran, Jim would shoot them first. Why? Robert asked. His voice was steady, calm. The voice of a man who'd seen 70 winters and wasn't afraid of dying, just wanted to understand. The church account, Jim said. You were going to find it. I couldn't let that happen. $847,000, Robert said. I already found it, Jim. I've known for a week. Jim's expression didn't change. Then you understand. He raised the gun. Marcus moved fast. He'd been a Navy SEAL. He knew how to disarm someone, but Jim wasn't an amateur. He sidestepped, brought the gun up, and fired. Marcus went down, shot in the chest. Julie Webb, 30 miles away in the church basement, felt something break inside her heart at that exact moment, though she didn't know why. Samuel lunged. Jim shot him twice, once in the stomach, once in the throat. Robert stood still, watching, calculating. "Oh, you won't get away with this," Robert said. "Margaret knows we left with you. 40 people saw us. Margaret will think I died trying to save you," Jim said. "Everyone will." He shot Robert once, center mass. Robert collapsed. Jim checked his watch. 9:51 p.m. The tornado would hit Greensburg in 4 minutes. He dragged the bodies to the van. All 3. Marcus was still breathing, but barely. Blood filled his lungs. Each breath was a gurgle. Jim opened the van's rear doors. John was still alive in the back, moaning through the gag. Jim shot John once in the face, point blank, made sure the face was unrecognizable. Then he arranged the bodies. John in the driver's seat, slumped over the wheel. Marcus, Robert, and Samuel in the back. He went back to the church, drove Margaret's car. She'd left the keys in the ignition in her panic, pulled up to the basement entrance. The tornado was 1 mile away. The sound was unreal. People in the basement were screaming. "We need more people," Jim shouted down the stairs. "The nursing home is locked. I need help breaking down the door." Catherine Marsh came up, then Dorothy Keene, then Linda Chen, then Julie Webb, because her husband had gone to help and she wanted to see him, needed to see him, had a terrible feeling she couldn't name. Tyler came with her. She couldn't leave him alone. Margaret and the kids stayed in the shelter. David held Sarah, who was sobbing, into his shoulder. "Where's Marcus?" Julie asked as soon as she reached the parking lot. "At the van," Jim said. "We're all going together, faster that way." They piled into Margaret's car. Julie in the front passenger seat, Tyler in her lap, Catherine, Dorothy, and Linda in the back. Jim drove. Same route, same dirt roads, toward the lake. "Why are we leaving town?" Julie demanded. "The nursing home is—" Jim pulled the gun. Julie saw it and understood instantly. She'd been a nurse for 10 years. She'd seen violence. She knew what was about to happen. She grabbed the door handle, locked, child safety locks engaged. "Tyler, close your eyes," she said calmly. "Close them tight and don't open them no matter what you hear. Can you do that for Mommy?" Tyler, terrified, nodded and buried his face in her chest. Jim parked beside the van. The tornado was 1/2 mile away now. The noise drowned out everything. "Out," he said. They climbed out. Catherine tried to run. Jim shot her in the back. She fell. Dorothy started praying. "Our Father who art in heaven—" Jim shot her mid-prayer. Linda Chen just stared at him. "Why?" "Because I couldn't let Robert ruin everything," Jim said, and shot her too. Julie stood very still, holding Tyler. The boy's eyes were squeezed shut, his small hands covering his ears. "Please," Julie said, "let him go. He's 4 years old. He doesn't understand any of this. Just let him go, and I won't fight." For a moment, Jim hesitated. Then he thought about witnesses, about Rachel and Emma and Joshua in Oklahoma City, who needed him alive, about the life he'd built in California in his mind, the clean escape, the fresh start. "I'm sorry," he said. He shot Julie through the heart. She died instantly, collapsing around Tyler, her body shielding him as she fell. Tyler screamed, a sound that cut through even the tornado's roar. Jim looked at the boy, 4 years old, crying, covered in his mother's blood. Jim raised the gun. Tyler looked up at him, big brown eyes, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Mr. Pastor, please." Jim pulled the trigger. Marcus Webb opened his eyes in the back of the van. He'd been shot in the chest. The bullet had collapsed his lung. He was drowning in his own blood, each breath agony. But he was alive, and he was a Navy SEAL. He'd been trained to survive the unsurvivable. He could hear voices outside, gunshots, screaming. Julie's voice, Tyler's scream. Marcus tried to move. Couldn't. His hands were zip-tied. He could barely breathe. The van rocked. Someone was loading bodies into the back. He felt weight pressing against him. More bodies. Dorothy's body landed on top of him, still warm, blood soaking into his shirt. Then the rear doors slammed. The chain rattled, the lock clicked. Darkness. Marcus heard the driver's door open. Close. Footsteps moving away. Then the van lurched. It was moving. No engine. The van was rolling. Downhill. Toward the water. Marcus understood. He was going to drown. The van hit the water nose first. Cold rushed in through vents, through gaps in the doors. The van floated for maybe 10 seconds. Air trapped in the cabin. Then the nose dipped and it began to sink. Water poured in faster now. Up to Marcus's waist, his chest, his neck. He held his breath. The van was sinking fast, pulled down by the weight of the bodies, the engine block, gravity. It hit the bottom, 40 feet deep, maybe 45. The van settled into the mud. Total darkness. Marcus's lungs were on fire. He'd been holding his breath for 90 seconds. His chest wound, leaked blood into the water around him. He had maybe 30 seconds of consciousness left. His hands were still zip-tied, but the SEAL training kicked in. He dislocated his thumbs, painful even through the shock, and pulled his hands free. He found the rear door handle. Pulled. Locked from the outside. He pulled harder. The chain held. He moved to the side door. Also locked. His vision was tunneling. His lungs were screaming for air. His mouth opened involuntarily. Water rushing in. He was going to die here. But he was a father. A husband. And Tyler was out there. Julie was out there. He had to try. He found the back window. Kicked it. Once. Twice. His boots were heavy, waterlogged. The glass cracked. Third kick. The glass shattered outward. Marcus pulled himself through. The gap was barely large enough. His shoulders scraped on broken glass. His chest wound tore open wider, but he was through. He kicked upward, up toward where he thought the surface was. In the darkness it was impossible to tell. His lungs gave up. Water poured in. He was drowning from the inside. But some part of his brain, the part trained to survive, kept kicking. His head broke the surface. He gasped, coughed, vomited water and blood. The tornado was here. It passed 300 yards to the south, tearing across the lake. The suction pulled water up in a massive spray. Debris flew everywhere, chunks of buildings, trees, vehicles. Marcus swam. His chest was on fire. Every stroke was agony, but he swam toward the shore. He reached the bank, pulled himself onto the mud, lay there gasping, coughing blood. He could see Greensburg in the distance, or what used to be Greensburg. The tornado was a mile-wide monster, glowing with embedded lightning, tearing the town apart. Everything was gone. The church, his house, everything. Julie, Tyler. He tried to stand, collapsed. The bullet wound in his chest was bad. Lung collapsed, ribs broken. He was bleeding internally, but he had to get help, had to tell someone what happened. He crawled, 20 feet, 30 feet, up the slope away from the lake. Then he collapsed again, couldn't move. He lay there in the mud, rain pouring down, watching Greensburg die. Marcus Webb survived for 48 more hours. He crawled into a drainage culvert a quarter-mile from the lake, stayed there, drifting in and out of consciousness. The bullet wound was fatal, slowly but fatal. His lung had collapsed completely. Blood filled his chest cavity. Infection was setting in. He had no phone, no way to call for help. The tornado had destroyed the cell towers. Even if he'd had a phone, there was no signal. On May 6, 2007, at approximately 3:00 p.m., Marcus Webb died of a combination of blood loss, hypothermia, and pneumonia. His body lay in the culvert for 2 years. In September 2009, a hunter named Dale Pritchard was tracking deer in the area. He found the body. By then, Marcus was unrecognizable. Decomposition, animals, weather. They'd reduced him to bones and scraps of clothing. Dale called it in. Sheriff Bradley investigated. The body was taken to the state medical examiner. Without dental records, Marcus's dentist office had been destroyed in the tornado, and with DNA testing being expensive and not standard procedure for unidentified remains in rural Kansas in 2009, the body was labeled John Doe. They buried him in the Greensburg Cemetery. Plot 247. A simple marker. Unknown male found 09-2009. Marcus Webb lay 30 feet from where his wife and son were memorialized. He just didn't have a name on his stone. Jim Holbrook walked away from the lake at 10:03 p.m. on May 4, 2007. The tornado was tearing through Greensburg. He could see it from 3 miles away. The town was being erased. He walked to where he'd hidden his personal vehicle. A 1998 Honda Accord registered under a fake name, started it and drove south. By midnight, he was in Oklahoma. By dawn, he was in Texas. By the end of the week, he was in California. He had $127,000 in cash in the trunk. The rest of the embezzled money was in offshore accounts he'd been carefully setting up for 2 years. In California, he became Michael Stevens. Quiet, unremarkable. He got a job as a bookkeeper for a mid-sized construction firm, rented a small apartment in Bakersfield, kept his head down. Rachel in Oklahoma City received a phone call on May 5th. Jim, the man she knew as Jim Fletcher, pharmaceutical salesman, told her he'd been in a serious car accident. Total loss. He was okay, but he needed to take some time off work to recover. Could she handle expenses for a few months? She could. She loved him. She believed him. Jim visited every few months, just enough to maintain the relationship. He sent money. He was a good father to Emma and Joshua as far as they knew. In 2011, he met a woman in California named Diana. She had no idea about Rachel, or Margaret, or the 12 people in the van. He married Diana in 2013. Different name, fake social security number. New life. He lived in Bakersfield for 17 years, worked, paid taxes under his fake identity, went to barbecues, helped neighbors move furniture. Was, by all accounts, a decent guy. No one knew. Back in Greensburg, the town rebuilt. The tornado on May 4, 2007 killed 11 people total. The entire town, 95% of structures, was destroyed. The official death toll didn't include the 12 from the prayer group. They weren't considered dead. They were considered missing. Sheriff Bradley spent months searching. Search teams combed every collapsed building, every debris field, every mile of the tornado's path. They found nothing. No bodies. No van. Nothing. The theory, eventually, was that the van had been picked up by the tornado and carried miles away. Maybe disintegrated mid-air. Maybe dropped into a field and buried under tons of debris. The church van was insured for $35,000. The insurance company paid out after 18 months. The families held memorial services in 2008. 12 names were added to a memorial in the rebuilt town square. Margaret Holbrook, David Holbrook, Sarah Holbrook, Robert Chen, Linda Chen, Marcus Webb, Julie Webb, Tyler Webb, Dorothy Keene, Samuel Marsh, Catherine Marsh, and Pastor Jim Holbrook. Beloved husband, father, shepherd, taken too soon. His name was engraved in stone. People left flowers. Margaret's parents grieved for years, blaming themselves for not insisting Jim come to the shelter with the family. Rachel in Oklahoma City never understood why Jim Fletcher stopped visiting. She tried to call. His number was disconnected. She drove to the addresses he'd given her. They were fake. Eventually, she realized she'd been conned. She just didn't know the full extent of it. In 2024, Jim Holbrook made a mistake. He was 71 now, still living in Bakersfield, still married to Diana, still Michael Stevens on paper. On June 8, 2024, he was at a local farmer's market. Someone was filming a segment for a local news station about the market's expansion. Jim happened to walk past the camera. For maybe 3 seconds, his face was visible in the background. The segment aired that evening on KJET TV, the NBC affiliate in Bakersfield. It was uploaded to YouTube. 2,000 miles away, in Wichita, Kansas, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen was working on her doctoral thesis in forensic facial recognition. She was using a new AI-driven program that could scan thousands of hours of video footage and match faces to missing persons databases. She'd been feeding it footage from news broadcasts across the country, testing the accuracy. On June 10, 2024, her program flagged a match. A man in a farmer's market video matched a missing person from Greensburg, Kansas, 2007. Pastor Jim Holbrook. Confidence level, 94.7%. Dr. Chen. No relation to Robert and Linda Chen, though she'd grown up in Kansas and knew the story, immediately called the FBI. The FBI reviewed the footage. ran their own facial recognition, confirmed the match. On June 11, 2024, federal agents knocked on the door of a modest house in Bakersfield, California. Michael Stevens answered. "Are you James Holbrook?" the lead agent asked. Jim's face didn't change. "I don't know who that is. You were born in Wichita, Kansas, April 3, 1966. You have a twin brother named John. You served as pastor of First Baptist Church in Greensburg from 2001 to 2007. You disappeared in the tornado on May 4, 2007. You have the wrong person." The agent smiled. "We can do this with a warrant and DNA, or you can make it easier." Jim looked at Diana standing behind him, at the life he'd built, at the 17 years of running that were about to end. "I want a lawyer," he said. They arrested him on the spot, extradited him to Kansas. The DNA match to Margaret Holbrook's parents confirmed his identity. On June 12th, while Jim Holbrook was being processed into Kiowa County Jail, Dennis Cole was draining Fisher Lake, 40 miles away. The van was pulled from the lake bed on June 13, 2024. A wrecker with a winch strong enough to pull semi-trucks dragged the van onto the shore. Sheriff Bradley supervised. Martinez documented everything. The FBI sent a forensic team. The chain was cut. The rear doors were opened. The smell was beyond description. 17 years of decay in a sealed metal coffin, but the water had preserved more than anyone expected. 9 bodies were inside. They were tangled together, collapsed in on each other like they'd tried to huddle for warmth or comfort in the final moments. The water had skeletonized them, flesh gone, clothing mostly disintegrated, but bones remained, and teeth. Dental records could identify them. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Lisa Yamamoto from Kansas State University was called in. Over 4 days, she carefully removed and catalogued each set of remains. The findings were precise. Victim 1, driver's seat. Adult male, 40-45 years old. Significant facial trauma consistent with gunshot wound. Teeth matched. John Holbrook, Jim's twin brother. Victim 2, passenger seat. Adult male, 30-35. Gunshot wound to chest. Teeth matched. Marcus Webb. Wait, Marcus Webb. But Marcus Webb had been found in 2009, buried as John Doe. Dr. Yamamoto requested the exhumation of Plot 247, unknown male. The bones were compared. DNA, extracted from the teeth of the 2009 body, and compared to DNA from Julie Webb's parents and Tyler Webb's baby teeth, preserved in a keepsake box by Julie's mother, confirmed it. The body found in 2009 was Marcus Webb, which meant Marcus Webb survived the lake, made it to shore, lived for 2 days before dying. The forensics team examined the van's interior more closely. Scratches on the metal near the rear doors, deep gouges, made by fingernails. They tested the metal, found biological material embedded, blood, skin, matched to Marcus Webb. He'd tried to claw through the door. They found his cell phone, a 2007 flip phone, somehow preserved in a sealed interior pocket. The battery was long dead, but the SIM card was intact. Forensic digital recovery pulled the data. 43 attempted calls between 9:52 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. on May 4, 2007. Julie's cell. His parents in Missouri. Random numbers he must have misdialed in the darkness. None connected. The van was underwater. No signal. The last attempted call was at 10:15 p.m. After that, nothing. He'd escaped around 10:20 p.m. based on the timeline. Survived 2 days. Died alone, was found, was buried without a name, 30 feet from his wife and son's memorial. The other 7 bodies in the van were identified. Robert Chen, Linda Chen, Dorothy Keene, Samuel Marsh, Catherine Marsh, Julie Webb, Tyler Webb. All showed signs of gunshot wounds, entry points visible on skeletal remains. The van's interior told the story forensic teams reconstructed. Jim Holbrook shot the men first, arranged their bodies, then returned with the women and child, shot them by the lake, loaded them into the van, chained the doors, released the parking brake, watched it roll into the water. Tyler Webb's remains showed he'd been alive when the van submerged. Water in the skull cavity suggested drowning, not immediate death from the gunshot. He'd survived being shot, woke up in the van, drowned in the dark, surrounded by his dead mother. He was 4 years old. Jim Holbrook's trial began in October 2024. The prosecution had everything: DNA, forensics, the van, the bodies. the embezzlement records, Rachel's testimony about Jim's double life, facial recognition footage. Jim's defense attorney argued mistaken identity, claimed John Holbrook had been the pastor. Jim had been the homeless twin. They'd switched places. It took the jury 4 hours to convict. 12 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of embezzlement, multiple counts of fraud. The judge sentenced him to 12 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. Jim Holbrook is 71 years old. He will die in prison. Before we get to what happened next, I want to ask you something. Have you hit the subscribe button yet? Because this channel tells stories like this. Deep dives into cases that deserve to be remembered, victims who deserve justice, and truths that took decades to uncover. If you care about that, subscribe and share this video. The more people who see it, the more we can tell stories like these. Now let's talk about the funerals. In November 2024, Greensburg held a second funeral. The first had been in 2008, with empty caskets and memorials. 12 names on stones, no bodies to bury. The second funeral was real. They buried Robert and Linda Chen together, Samuel and Catherine Marsh together, Dorothy Keene alone, though her adult children flew in from across the country to say goodbye again. Marcus Webb was moved from plot 247. His stone was replaced with one that said his name. Marcus Webb, 1973-2007, husband, father, hero. Julie and Tyler Webb were buried together, 1 casket, mother and son. The way Julie would have wanted it, her parents said. Margaret Holbrook's body wasn't in the van. She died in the church basement when the tornado collapsed the building. Her remains had been identified and buried in 2007. David and Sarah Holbrook were also in the church basement. They were buried in 2007. But their father's name, engraved on the family stone, was removed. Where it had said James Holbrook, beloved husband and father, there was now a blank space, polished, smooth, erased. The memorial in the town square was updated. Jim Holbrook's name was removed. 11 names remained. The town of Greensburg is different now. After the 2007 tornado, it rebuilt as the greenest town in America. Solar panels, wind turbines, LEED-certified buildings, a model of sustainability. The population is smaller, around 800 people, but those who stayed are proud, resilient. They survived an EF5 tornado and the betrayal of a man they trusted. Fisher Lake has been refilled. The dam repair is complete. The lake looks the same as it did before, but people don't fish there anymore, don't swim, don't boat. It's not legally prohibited. It's just no one wants to. On clear days, if you stand on the dam and look out over the water, you can see where the van was. The spot where 40 feet down 12 people drowned because one man decided they were obstacles. In 2025, a small monument was placed on the shore. A simple stone with 12 names and 1 sentence. They were betrayed but not forgotten. Jim Holbrook sits in El Dorado Correctional Facility, maximum security, serving 12 life sentences. He's in his 70s. His health is failing. Diabetes, heart problems. The prison medical unit says he has maybe 5 years left. He receives no visitors. Diana divorced him in 2024. Rachel refuses to speak to him. Emma and Joshua, his children in Oklahoma City, now adults, learned the truth and want nothing to do with him. In interviews from prison, he agreed to talk to one reporter in 2025. Jim showed no remorse. "I did what I had to do," he said. "Survival. That's all it was. Robert was going to ruin me, ruin my family. I protected what was mine." When asked about Tyler Webb, the 4-year-old he shot and left to drown, Jim said, "I think about that one sometimes. The boy. He didn't need to be there. But his mother brought him. That's not on me, that's on her." The reporter ended the interview. What do we take from this? Greensburg, Kansas is a town that survived an EF5 tornado. It survived losing 95% of its structures. It survived losing people to a force of nature. But the real damage wasn't from the tornado. It was from the man who used the tornado as cover, who murdered 12 people, including his own wife and children, to protect a lie. The tornado lasted 22 minutes. Jim Holbrook's lies lasted 17 years. Natural disasters are terrifying because they're random, uncontrollable. You can't negotiate with a tornado, but human evil is worse because it's chosen, calculated, executed by someone who looked you in the eye and called you friend. Pastor Jim Holbrook stood in a pulpit for 6 years. He preached about love, faith, sacrifice. He baptized children. He counseled families. He held the hands of dying congregants and prayed for their souls. And then he murdered 12 people, including a 4-year-old boy, to avoid accountability. That's the story. Not the tornado, not the destroyed town, not even the 17 years it took to find the van. The story is about a man who chose to be a monster, and the 12 people who trusted him until it was too late. Marcus Webb fought. He escaped the van. He survived 2 days with a bullet in his chest, a collapsed lung, and no help coming. He died trying to get home to save someone. He's the hero. Julie Webb shielded her son with her body as she died. She told him to close his eyes so he wouldn't see. She's the hero. Robert Chen figured out the embezzlement a week before he died. He could have run, could have gone to the police immediately. Instead, he scheduled a meeting to give Jim a chance to explain. He believed in fairness, even for a thief. He's the hero. Margaret Holbrook spent her last moments holding her children in a church basement, believing her husband was out saving lives. She's the hero. Jim Holbrook is the villain, and he'll die as one. Fisher Lake is quiet again. The water is calm, the dam is repaired, the monster is gone. But on still nights when the wind is right, locals say you can hear something. Not ghosts, not screams. A sound like metal scraping, like fingernails on steel. Like someone trying desperately to claw their way out of a locked van 40 feet underwater. It's probably just the wind. Probably the dam's structure settling. Probably nothing. But no one fishes there anymore. No one swims. And late at night, when the town is asleep, the 12 names on the memorial catch the moonlight and glow just a little brighter than they should. Greensburg, Kansas survived a tornado, but it will never forget what came after. If this story affected you, do 3 things. First, subscribe to this channel so you see more stories like this. Second, share this video. These victims deserve to be remembered, and their story deserves to be told. Third, leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you've been affected by tornadoes, by betrayal, by loss. Tell me where you're from, and if you remember the Greensburg tornado. Your story matters too. And to the families of the victims, if you're watching, I hope I told this with the respect and dignity your loved ones deserved. Thank you for watching. And remember, natural disasters are terrifying, but human evil is worse. Stay safe out there.